I know Royal had a new ship that was supposed to come out right now. That got pushed back to April, but that is a definite, right? I mean, I think it was pushed back because the shipyards all closed for the spring and, didn't do as much work as they would have. And I'm sure that affected the Viking ship. But so that ship is coming out now in April. And then there was supposed to be a ship coming out fall of 2021. That's gotten pushed back to spring of 2022. And there's at least 2 ships, I think, that the older ships that Royal has that they're just not going to bring back into service. They'll sell them off or scrap them or whatever they're going to do with them. They made the Grandeur was already set to have, I think even the last cast might have been on it already. If they weren't, they would have been coming up to the next rehearsals. So that ship is for sure going to not come back. And so there's the Vision class, the Grandeur, Vision, Enchantment, and I forget what the other one is. The Enchantment they stretched and made bigger. So my guess is that they'll get rid of probably those other 3 ships in that class. There's 2 older ships, the Majesty and the Empress, that are still in the fleet, which I would get rid of those, but they seem to keep those around because they're so, they're built in the early 1990s. So maybe they're just cash cows for them. I don't know what their reasoning is. I do know the Majesty can fit like 2,700 people, which for a smaller ship is pretty, you get more revenue. So I don't know how they're.
Well, I know Grandeur, and I think I was on the Empress just as a guest, as a passenger, like a couple, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Yeah, we just took a trip. My mom was like, "Let's go. We're gonna go to Cuba." So I was like, and it was in Tampa, and we live in Tampa. So I think that it was the Empress.
Yes, it was the Empress. Yeah, that's the only ship that went to Cuba.
Okay, that's the one then. And it was out of Tampa. So I lived in Ybor City in Tampa. So literally rolled my suitcase over to the streetcar. The streetcar drops you right off in front of the ship.
Yeah.
And it's free. So we literally didn't have to park anywhere. I lived down there. So we just hopped on the ship, went to Cuba, came back.
Wonderful. Yeah, I've never been on that ship, but they brought that ship back specifically for Cuba because its port was smaller and not as deep, and they needed a smaller ship. So it was a ship they had sold to a subsidiary, I don't know, 5 years before that, and then they just brought it back. So yeah. Oh, you're lucky you got to go because now they're not going. I mean, even before COVID.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's crazy. I really am fortunate that I got to do that. But hey, I still have Cuban rum and a couple of cohibas.
Oh wow. Oh. And the thing is, I mean, I'm hoping after the election and as we go into the next couple of years that they'll lift the travel limit, because I really want to go before it gets like all the cruise ships go there all the time, because then it's going to just be like another port.
Exactly.
So hopefully
when
that'll
I
work.
was there, it looked like it was like they were building a bunch of new hotels down there. That's what it looked like. They had cranes everywhere right off the port, and our bus broke down. We were stuck there for 2 hours. The guy, I guess everybody's a mechanic down there because they don't have mechanics shops.
Oh, okay.
All these old cars,
Yeah.
So, and I remember our bus broke down and we were just kind of like, but we can see the ship from here. It's like on the other side of the harbor.
But I'm sure they'll have to limit it to a degree. And I think that's how Royal was able to do, or their thought process is basically at least 50% of all the cabins on ships are balcony cabins. So they're only going to sell those. And I believe crew members all get their own rooms during this period because they don't want people living in that close to quarters in case one person gets sick. At least you have your own space to quarantine in.
That's smart.
So for the regular crew members, that's a better thing. But I also don't think that they're allowed off the ship. Maybe in Coco Cay because it's still Royal Caribbean controlled. But like when they come back to Miami or to Singapore, I'm sure they will not let crew members off the ship. So that's the crazy thing. I'm assuming I won't get off. And if I can get off in Coco Cay, I'll sure get off to go see it. But I won't. I mean, when we're in Miami, I'll just be on the ship. So
yeah, that's probably par for the course anyway, with or without COVID, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, you know what an install is like. I'm there to be. The funniest thing is people are like, don't you get tan when you go on those cruises? It's like, well, really? During the day, we're usually in a dark theater. We don't even know what time it is. And then, yes, evenings we're out, but it's not. Yeah, it's not.
People just think you're out there having fun cruising, just like everybody else. They don't realize like the work that goes into it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, And now I'm sure there'll be, just the protocols. The good thing is I actually feel, we have to COVID test before we go even get down there. Then when they get in there and we put us in quarantine, then we're COVID tested. And then after the 15 days that we're in, I obviously haven't seen anyone, they test us again, and then we'll be let into the cruise population that's on board. And so then it really is safe because everyone will have spent 15 days, and the only people then they would have been in contact with are the people who are on the ship who are not allowed to get off. So I feel fine doing that.
Yeah, I think it'll be fine. I do. They're doing it right.
Yeah. Doing it slowly. So yeah, it's not the way that I thought this year would go. But I have to say, because the last 3 years I've been the lead vocal director for the casting, the auditions. So my schedule has been, I've been on the road like 240 days a year, literally auditioning New York, London, Australia, South Africa,
Wow.
Rome, Paris, it's all amazing, but it's a lot. You know how that travel can be. You get in the pace of it, but when you're, when you have a week off or so, you're like, okay, I just do some laundry and I'm going to just lay in the bed. And, so now I had plenty of that time. So I'm very well rested and I'm ready. That's something that is unique about this is everyone now is tied to their devices in a way we weren't before. We're using them to, and the thing that's good about that is you can now have students from all over the country, places who people probably would never have connected with you because you weren't in their location. And now it's more about, okay, as long as we can make the time zone difference work, you can, or sign on, or you can be a part of these different things, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just getting into the marketing right now with it. I'm with a business coach actually. And me doing these interviews, I'm doing a lot of stuff that they're not telling me to do. They're just, this is stuff that I want to do because I feel like it's something that like I said, if I had the access to like talking to a casting director for a cruise ship, hearing an interview about what it's like to work on a cruise ship and what you're looking for, that's something that, goodness, if I'd known that stuff in my early 20s, I probably would have just dropped out of college and just gone, So, because I worked hard in college to get my degrees, and looking back, I'm like, what the heck did I need those college degrees for?
You went back to get your other master's after you worked with me, didn't you?
I did. Something, what's crazy about that contract, I'll never forget that contract. It was my last performing contract as a production singer. I was finishing my master's degree. I had 2 classes to go. I took we were on the ship at this point. So I did one of my finals in my bedroom, paid like 36 cents a minute for internet to take this final. Accidentally, like, it went off into the ether and I had finished it and I had to redo the test. So I had to do the test twice, paying 36 cents a minute. And I was like, I did better the second time around. Anyway, I got like an A- the first time. And then the second time I got an A+. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. Fine by me. And then the second final was in port in Miami. And I was like, I'm having a mango margarita. And so I totally had a mango margarita while I took this final. I got an A on the final.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Well, the internet now is way cheaper. As you know, the system and the stuff they use is different, but wow, that's brutal. But good for you, you got the degrees.
I got the degree. Yeah, and then we went into rehearsals for In the Air. That was, midnight rehearsals. We had from midnight until 8 a.m. And then 8:30, we had safety training in the morning. So we had safety training from 8:30 till 11 or 8:30 to noon or something like that. So I had between noon and midnight to study. And so then I was like, it was crazy town.
Oh.
And then 2 days after I was done with my final, we were also done with In the Air rehearsals. And I was like, I'm going to the gym. So I went to the gym and I'm like, oh, I'm tired, but I don't care. And I don't even remember. Oh, I was in rehearsals for, what was the name of the show with the train?
Yes, it's Somewhere in Time.
Somewhere in Time. Yeah, Somewhere in Time. God, I loved the cast so much.
Somewhere in Time.
That cast with Sean Johnson.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then I literally, my foot like shuffled inside and it broke. My foot broke.
That's right. I remember that. Oh,
and
I know.
home for like
did you ever go back?
Yes. Yeah,
You
I
did
went
come
back
back? Okay.
because it was right at the beginning. And the girl,
Yes,
like
and
I already made my
Chandel
six
stayed on.
track. No,
Oh, she
no.
did. What happened?
Mm-mm. Chandel left. And then so the two other singers in the show covered what they could,
Oh,
but they
yeah.
couldn't cover other stuff. So um oh, what's her name? She was our dance captain. I can't think of her name right now. Anyway, she's lip synced to my sick track.
Okay.
Yeah,
Till you,
until I
till you
came
come
back.
back.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
I did remember
And
that because I think it happened after I got off the ship because it was like, we're getting everyone up to go, everything's working. And then it was like, oh, no, I heard it. Yeah, I remember.
uh, I felt like at that point, I had just gotten married a year prior, and I was like,
Oh, yeah.
maybe this is a sign I'm supposed to stay home with my husband. So I ended up not going back out, and yeah, and then I became a school teacher.
Wow. How was that?
I worked at the private school,
Oh,
so it was, I loved it. Actually, I loved teaching. It's just a whole lot of work. I think it was like harder than being a cruise director in some ways.
oh,
Um,
wow.
because I mean, well, maybe, I don't know, probably about the same. But I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun teaching, creating curricula for all different age groups. I was most proud of like my older kids who were in the show choirs and in the musicals. So, we had a lot of fun with that. I'm still in touch with several of my students from those
Uh,
days. And I still teach them too privately. So a couple of them.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why doing this particular the way I'm building the school, I want it to be for people who can't necessarily afford how to, to be in a private school, or
Yeah.
excuse me, or take private voice lessons, or whatever. I want it to be affordable for people. So
That's great. Well, there are some things out there, but especially someone, you've got good integrity and great training and a great experience that it can be a school, but it's also with a professional. A professional it's not someone who just, okay, I studied about this and now I'm creating a school about it. You've lived it and you know what it is. So I
yeah.
always think that makes such a big difference with, not to say that there aren't some academics, like I've had some great voice teachers who they sang, but they never had some huge career or something, because some people just really know the voice or are really good at helping you with things. But there is something, I think, especially when you coach, um, when you're working with someone who has lived it and seen it professionally and really knows what it takes. And it's not just this idea, but actually, this is what happens and this is what you're going to need for sure. And that kind of stuff.
Yep, exactly. That's I think, because I love technique. I'm a big proponent of good technique. And I do know the voice really well, but I really love just like throwing people out on the stage. Do it now, just go. Like do it, because even if it's not a paying gig, I make my kids audition. I make them sing like at nursing homes
Yeah.
or whatever they can do. And so the courses that I'm building right now, even though it's COVID, they're part of the courses that I'm building for 8-year-olds all the way up to adults, 3 different age groups, is for them to start learning songs and then perform it for have a Zoom performance.
Yeah.
You
That's
know,
wonderful.
it's just another
Yeah.
way to get out there, at least practice a little bit, maybe get your voice out there.
Well, especially, yeah, for young singers and people starting out, that's what I say too, is you just do it. Any opportunity, someone's wedding, someone's funeral, a party somewhere, or I totally went and played and sang at nursing homes. I did that when I probably started doing it when I was around 14. The same time I started singing at weddings. People saw me and they were like, oh, do you do weddings? I was like, well, sure. And my mom was so happy when I turned 16 and she didn't have to drive me anymore. But yeah, I did that a lot as a kid and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and probably somebody inspired you to do the same thing, right? They told you just any opportunity that you can
Yeah,
take.
my music program in my elementary and junior high school and senior high school was pretty robust for a small town. And so, yeah, you were just encouraged, and they saw that I had talent. So, I took piano lessons for 10 years. I played trumpet for 10 years. I took guitar for maybe 3 or 4 summers, but I was in all the choirs, and I played accompaniment for the girls choir, and I was in jazz band and pep band. And, so I did all that stuff. So yeah, I was busy in that. And it just kind of, and then because it was a small community, a lot of those teachers were also in a church or played organ at a church and said, hey, we've got a couple weddings and they don't have any singers, would you be interested? So yeah, it all connects together. And
love it. There's so many opportunities. A lot of people say that you don't have that opportunity in a small town like that. I sometimes think you get like lost in the crowd in a place like New York City. And similarly, I moved down to Florida. I didn't know I could sing until I got to Florida, actually. I loved singing in New York and I did the choirs and stuff, but it was just for fun. But when I moved to Florida in this tiny little town, we had also a really fantastic show choir. The drama program was always doing something fun and going out there. We performed during Christmas 3 shows a day during the Christmas season.
Oh, wow.
We just hop from one nursing home or, ALF to another. And so that was part of what I got to experience also. And it was like, I went back for my 20-year reunion and they didn't have a choir program anymore.
Oh,
and the choir room, we went to the choir room and I looked and it was a storage facility for the school.
Oh,
and
well, all the more reason for your school, because I have a friend who teaches in Boston at in Franklin, Massachusetts. It's the Franklin Performing Arts School, and it's a woman who she's in her early 60s now. But when she was in her she went to college, went away. She was a pianist, concert pianist, and really was not into wanting to spend the next decade of her life traveling around. She wanted to get married and have kids and stuff. So she moved back to her hometown and she started this school, which is now huge. But part of what made it grow was she started it in the early 90s. And it was at the time when most of the public schools were just cutting the arts like crazy. So they needed a place to go because it wasn't just in the schools. And so I think that's, and now with the whole COVID thing, and as kids are now getting used to doing things online, that you're kind of at that perfect spot where you could slide in and go, hey, here's actually a program you can put a couple of your kids in and see, it's a way for them to even see how much they like it. Because they might go, oh, I just like, or if they're not serious, like, oh, I'm trying to audition and get in the community musical, they might just be doing it for fun to just as an activity. And it's a cheaper and an easier and a more accessible way, the kind of thing you would get in school if they did it in school.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something for everyone. There isn't, and especially with coaching and singing, I think there's value in going with someone for a while, but there's also really good value in jumping around a little bit to get different perspectives, to get different ideas, to work with teachers of different genders, because obviously our relationships to our voice and, basic technique is the same, but there are times when you're with, being opposite genders that there's a little bit, well, for me, it's this way. And I know for you, it's that way, but I can't do it exactly the way you do it because it's just a little bit different.
Yep.
It's interesting. I've always liked studying with female voice teachers more than men. I've had some good male teachers, but my favorite teachers were all women. And my last teacher I had in New York City was a woman. She was fantastic. I did not have a traumatic voice change. My voice just kind of, because I was a boy soprano and then I became a tenor. So it was, I think it's the guys who really become baritones where their voice is really dropping like in an extreme way. And so, and I don't know that my advice would be, that's the time to just let your voice rest for a few months and just, take a drama class, take a dance class, do other things, or take sports, whatever it is you want to do, but let your voice just kind of settle, because I think I personally wouldn't have wanted someone to be pushing me through that time. I was just in choirs at the time, and then you can just kind of sing. And I remember at one point I started consistently no longer being able to sing the soprano. I would either sing alto or I would sing the tenor line, and so and that's just how it works. Because you are such a technician. I mean, that was one of the things I loved working with you, because you knew how to use your voice and you knew what you were doing with your voice. And it's interesting Royal has a lot more theatrically trained singers nowadays, so that happens more. Back when you were there, it was still kind of 50-50. It was like, I'm sure you experienced that. There were a lot of singers who had these great voices, but maybe they sang in bands, but they weren't necessarily musically trained that well, in my opinion.
Right.
But there's more of those now, and so it's just interesting. The biggest thing for me is the versatility of style. That's what I've become an expert at helping people with, because you might sing something from Phantom of the Opera in one show, and then you're singing a Celine Dion song in the other show, and you went through that, and so when you have good technique, you really can do it. Now, we'll obviously, Celine Dion is Celine Dion because she's not legit. If you put her in Phantom, she would still be Celine doing it. But if you're well trained and you know your voice and you have good technique, there's just style things that you can implement that really help you. And especially for auditions, I've helped a lot of people get jobs because in the audition room, just because if I can see, I know they have technique, I can go, okay, just let's do this with your voice instead, and try this with your language. And it helps them become a little more pop sounding, so they're not just so legit sounding or so musical theater. Anyway, so lots of people can really, the younger, I would say anyone who's like under 25, they grew up singing it both anyway. And even now, theater programs, I've witnessed, like, there are kids coming out of some of these programs that actually can really belt, and they can do, an Ariana Grande song, and they can do musical theater as well. The good ones can do that. Whereas when I was in college, that was very separate. Well, first of all, they didn't teach pop music at all.
Yeah.
And it was like legit, or okay, if you're like musically theater, then that way. And I trained legit. Oratorio was really my love more than opera. And so I did a lot of oratorio in college and out of college. And I would say I'm more of a legit singer, but I've always had a pop sensibility to my singing, and just because I love that kind of music. And there's most male pop singers tend to have my range. They're usually higher voice types. So as a kid, I'd sing along, and that was my thing. But for training, for sure, it was, oh, this is classically, we're not doing that stuff, that kind of attitude.
Yeah. Well, I was the same way. When I was in college, I was singing in a band with Tracy Camps.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I love Tracy. Oh.
And a couple of other singers that were at Royal too at that time. So I was singing in this band with them, and going to college, doing the operas, doing the chamber singers, teaching, and I kept everything so separate. And I was so scared to tell my voice teacher, even though I knew she was a backup singer for Diana Ross back in like the 60s.
Oh
yeah. So, but I knew this, but she was all technical, all classical opera, and finally, I don't know, sometime in my master's degree, I finally told her, I was like, listen, I've been singing in a band for like 6 years. And she's like, I know, baby. And I was like, how do you know this? Because she knows everything. And she's like, as long as you're singing with good technique and you're not around any cigarette smoke, you're fine. You're fine. I was like, why didn't I tell you this 6 years ago, when I probably could have gotten maybe some training with you being a backup singer for Diana Ross? I could have gotten some belting training instead of having to learn it on stage. It was a really good school when we were there, but not anymore. Everything's sort of, that's why I think people like us, we're taking our training online. And where maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was kind of looked down upon. Oh, you're teaching online? That's not real teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we're starting to see, okay, the real teachers are out there. And I think the real teachers are going to have a lot more, we have the experience, but I think that experience is going to kind of show above those who don't have the training and don't have that real, the real training that I think legit coaches and teachers have.
Yeah.
So,
no, absolutely.
Just my 2 cents on that, because I think we're gonna finally get, our heyday.
Yeah. Well, things will change and evolve and grow out of this, but I do think there's going to be an online thing that now is going to be maintained, I think, because it's just easier. Like, if you think, instead of having to drive around town, it's like, oh, okay, I can take one of my classes can be this way. And especially once 5G comes and becomes for real and we can really have no lag time, then it really, you know, you could, it's, if as long as you can, once you get to the point where you can play along with the person who's online with you, then it's going to be a whole different game. So you're really starting this at a perfect time.